Hello and welcome to discussion today on Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Tina Jha. Rajya Sabha Chairman M. Venkaiah Naidu administered oath to the newly elected members of the upper house on Monday. Congratulating the new members on their election to the August House, the chairman urged them to uphold rules and procedures of the House. He called upon the new members to strive to strengthen democracy, expressing hope that they will enhance the dignity and prestige of the House. He reiterated the importance of maintaining decency, decorum and dignity of the upper house, asserting that it can be upheld only through adherence to 3 Ds, namely debate, discuss and decide. He also urged the new members not to fall prey to the temptation of the 4th D, which he termed as disruptions. Listen in.
लोगों में संसद के बारे में और जनप्रतिनिधियों के बारे में बहुत आकांक्षा है। वो आकांक्षा के अनुसार हम लोग हमारा व्यवहार, हमारा आचरण होना बहुत जरूरी है। राज्यसभा is a house of elders. So the legislators across the country and also people at large, particularly youngsters, they look to Parliament and they look to Rajya Sabha for guidance and inspiration. So our conduct should add to the decency, dignity and decorum of the House. So I always tell members, discuss, debate and decide. Do not take recourse to the 4th D, that is disruption. Because we are all seeing the image of the institutions, legislatures, are going down because of certain happenings and all. So some of you are experienced in legislature, why some of you, most of you. I know the background. And also you have enough experience in public life in various fields. So please utilize this opportunity to see that we all conduct ourselves to enhance the dignity of this House and also the respect for these institutions.
On discussion today, we will analyze the concerns expressed by the Rajya Sabha chairman regarding frequent disruptions that he said are denting the image of legislatures considered to be the cornerstone of democracy. So to discuss this, we have with us 2 special guests who are joining us on the program. Let me introduce them to you. We have with us senior journalist Shekhar Iyer and Mr. Praful Ketkar, editor of The Organizer. Welcome, gentlemen, on this edition of discussion today. Mr. Iyer, if I could begin the program today with you. You heard the Vice President, while addressing the newly elected members after administering the oath to them, he expressed concern over frequent disruptions. And if you remember last week, while speaking at the All India Presiding Officers Conference as well, one thing that he repeatedly stressed upon was the frequent disruptions that are denting the image of our legislatures. What, according to you, are the reasons that have, in recent years, led to this anguish by the chairman of the upper house?
Well, we have seen how even the last session, which was conducted, we have seen that how, despite, a lot of restrictions caused by the pandemic, there is a tendency among the members who feel that they cannot put across their views on the floor of the House. Rather, they resort to sending out a message that they have disrupted the House. Now, this tendency has grown because they feel somehow that they are not able to intelligently argue their case. And you see, when do you thump the desk? There is a saying among lawyers, when you have points with you, you argue. When you don't have points to say, you thump your desk. This is a kind of a saying among the lawyers,
Yes.
So that is what is exactly happening. And more particularly, I think what the chairman Rajya Sabha was very concerned or is always concerned is, you see, even a sitting of the House requires a lot of coordination between the legislature wing as well as the executive. And also, a lot of money is spent, to get the members to come and for the session to be held. and a lot of details are procured in terms of information, data, and the whole process is mandated by the rules and procedures, which are very clear. Because ours is a democracy through debate, through legislature. And democracy means debate, democracy means discussion. And the legislature is primarily means for legislative business. That is a point that is always, said. I remember the late President Pranab Mukherjee, who was himself an eminent parliamentarian. He always had this point, whether he was in the opposition or in the ruling party, that the whole idea should be that opposition must have its say. It must get all the opportunity to put across its points. But the government must have its way when it comes to legislative business. But unfortunately, we have seen a tendency among certain opposition parties when they feel that they have the required strength to say to oppose or stall a particular legislation, then they resort to a hangama and see that the house is disrupted and the business is not conducted. Now, what happens is if this is the method, then you find that sometimes the proceedings reflect as if it is happening in some municipality, council or in some college union election. That impression should not go because, after all, the Rajya Sabha particularly is known as the House of the Elders.
Yes.
And it is a council of states. So people who come here have very varied experience in public life, and they bring with them that experience and knowledge and understanding which they must enunciate on the floor of the House. So what the chairman wants is all the provisions are there in the rules of conduct of business, where the relevant sections are there. Go for a structured discussion. Give your proper notice. Raise your issues. Bring your point. Yes, opposition has all the right to put the government on the back. But instead of doing that, because probably they don't want to do it because they feel that they are not having the requisite case on their side, or I do not know the reason. But the tendency has been, to resort to some kind of a thing and then say that, we have disrupted the proceedings. Well, I think that's a very unfortunate thing. And also, as the Vice President cautioned, see, people's expectations are going up.
Yes.
And particularly after the last Lok Sabha election and the previous Lok Sabha election of 2014 and 2019, people have given a huge mandate to a prime minister with a very specific charter before them that they want faster development and time is no longer a luxury. So every minute of sitting of either houses of parliament has to be geared to that objective which the people have reposed through this mandate.
And unfortunately, sir, we are losing out on a lot of time because of disruptions. Coming to you, Mr. Praful Ketkar, Mr. Iyer has beautifully pointed out what has led to disruptions of this kind. He rightly pointed out that dissent is the beauty of democracy and it should be conducted through fair debates in the House. But sadly, disruptions is the new normal. What we've seen in recent years is the state of affairs in the parliament, in the state legislatures going from bad to worse. So where is course correction needed? Where are we lacking? Are we not training our new members efficiently? Are the political parties not doing enough to, make their members understand the decorum and the discipline that is to be maintained in parliament?
Thank you, Tina, for having me here. See, we need to understand two things. When the live telecast of parliamentary proceedings started, many people believed that, it will be one educating people about the legislative process. And at the same time, it will keep a kind of pressure on the legislators to behave because the entire nation is watching. Now, some people have started using it as a mechanism to convey their message to their respective constituencies through this live telecast. To some extent, I can even understand this with Lok Sabha because people, they are directly elected from their particular constituency and they want to make certain point. But even there is a method involved in that. But what is happening in case of Rajya Sabha is recently, because of the kind of majority that the ruling party has in Lok Sabha, what Rajya Sabha chairman earlier also called that boycotting and disruption has been used as an instrument of blocking legislation. I'll just give you some numbers that will tell you the real picture. Uh, uh, by and large, since 2014, the average number of sittings and the hours are going up. But when it comes to Rajya Sabha, what has happened from 2015 to 2019, out of total 332 sittings of especially related to question hour, only 133 hours and 17 minutes were spent raising questions. It means only 60% of the time was utilized to raise pertinent questions, and that is a prerogative of the members. So, two things are clear. Rajya Sabha has become a real politicking ground because the focus has shifted from Lok Sabha to Rajya Sabha because the ruling party doesn't have a clear cut age in terms of numbers in Rajya Sabha. So whatever opposition and smaller parties especially want to show, so they are using this disruption and boycotting as an instrument. This is one. But while doing so, they are forgetting the fact that Rajya Sabha is more, why it is called as the House of Elders, simply because, they are supposed to, it is the only continuous house, parliamentary house, and it is supposed to be a kind of a mechanism that will bring wisdom to the legislative process.
Okay.
Legislation is very serious business, and if Rajya Sabha doesn't show that through its conduct, then I afraid the entire parliamentary procedure will come under some kind of scanner from the common people. And that's why we need to sensitize, and that's what Mr. Venkaiah Naidu has been doing, and he has been doing last time when 43 newly elected members took their oath. Then also he raised this point. He has been sensitizing these newly elected members that you have to study the rules and the ways and the issues you need to, bring forward in terms of discussion, debate, and decide. So that decision-making process through debating has to be a democratic culture,
Yes.
and that cause of democracy has to be, taken forward.
Okay, so taking forward the points made by Mr. Ketkar to you, Mr. Iyer, he says the House of Elders has today become a political ground. And with the way the things are going, the disruptions continue in every session that we witness. What is the best way forward? Is there a need to bring about some kind of parliamentary reforms?
Well, I think, in terms of censure of an errant member, largely you have seen that both the chair and the other presiding officers tend to take a kinder view, thinking that, okay, in a spur of moment, certain things happen. But I think a time has come that such errant behavior has to be, singled out, and some exemplary kind of action is required, because last time we saw how the rules books were torn, mics were broken. So we have seen those incidents, and I think that has deeply upset a lot of us who believe in proper parliamentary debates and proper parliamentary outcomes. Because if the tendency is, of course, there are times when some member does get agitated and some things happen, and later he apologizes. But we have also seen an instance recently where the errant behavior was passed out by their parties and their leaders. See, after all, it is not just the job of the government or the parliamentary affairs minister. It is equally important for the opposition leaders and political parties to realize, if today the image of the parliament or the proceedings are seen in a very bad light, it affects all of them. It is not just the government of the day. Because what has to be understood is, we have to preserve the tradition and we have to preserve the sanctity of the house. Because this has been bequeathed to us by our constitutional fathers, who have provided for all kinds of checks and balances. And if only every member follows the rules of procedure, he or she will get ample opportunity to raise whatever issues they want. Of course, our democracy is by numbers. If the opposition does not have sufficient number to, say, block a legislation it thinks is not in the interest of the country, it has to accept the fact that it has been considered by others who are supporting, let's say, the government on a particular measure. Now, this is actually the spirit of accommodation. That what is needed today is accommodative spirit as to appreciate how our parliamentary process and procedures have evolved over time. Because there have been precedents when, forgetting the, I would say, political lines or political leanings, many members of the houses have, gone above, risen above the party affiliations and try to sort out problems which affects everyone, whether it is farmers' issue or whether it is national security, because these are issues. It is doesn't concern only a party which is in power. It concerns equally the opposition, because I think a large kind of, I would say, an appreciation that there are some issues in where the government and the opposition will have to go beyond, purely partisan consideration.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mr. Ketkar, do you agree with Mr. Iyer when he says that it's not just the job of the Parliamentary Affairs Minister or the government to ensure that legislations are passed smoothly or, constructive debates are held in the House? Is there a need for other political parties also who have members in the upper house to introspect about the present state of affairs, which in a way is going to help enhance the standing of the legislatures, whose image is being severely dented? And as you heard the Vice President say, public opinion about these highest institutions is eroding day by day.
Absolutely. What we have seen in the last session, one, now we are seeing this, all protests and everything. But, when you had a chance to discuss and debate these bills related to reforms in the agricultural sector, you decided to boycott. And instead of, debating these issues and getting clarifications from the government, you allowed, the bills to be passed amidst boycott and ruckus that we have seen in Rajya Sabha. We have seen another incident where, in an unprecedented way, the motion, notice of motion for removal of deputy chairman was brought in. That was another, shocking example. This clearly shows that the maturity, because ultimately the legitimacy and the confidence in these legislative processes is very critical for the democratic institutions to sustain. We are indirectly giving space to the people who, against whom Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar in his last speech, warned against when he gave his famous speech, which is known as the grammar of anarchy. We are giving space to such forces who believe in anarchy. And we have to, sensitize our, and that's why this punitive actions, there are already rules and regulations. The parties and the members who misbehave and do not follow basic parliamentary norms, they have to pay. They have to face the consequences as per the rule book. They just can't throw away and, throw away the rule books. So I feel that on the one hand, they need to be sensitized, educated, and they should be, unfortunately, earlier there used to be party forums to train their newly elected members. Now that culture has also gone down. There used to be various training programs for the newly elected members. Barring few parties, now that culture is completely vanishing. Now at the parliamentary level, certain trainings are being institutionalized. I think they need to be strengthened. What Mr. Venkaiah Naidu is doing, that is one way of, when the chair himself is very sensitive and particular about, educating newly elected members. But at the same time, I feel there has to be some kind of, sensitization in the political leadership, the party mechanism also, where they will have to face the consequences of unparliamentary behavior on the parliamentary forum.
And this has to be taken seriously. Mr. Shekhar Iyer, do you want to add to the various reformative measures, the initiatives that are being taken, as pointed out by Mr. Ketkar, to ensure that for the public, the legislatures, the temples of democracy, as asserted by the Vice President, remain sacrosanct?
Absolutely. I think there has to be some kind of a deterrence and some kind of a disincentive for such kind of behaviors which can no longer be condoned. And I am counting upon the new members of Rajya Sabha who have come. They are very young people. And there is a lot of hope in them. And they must also see that they have a long way to go. And also, those senior members of different parties, they must also realize that parties come and go, governments are formed. There is always, in a democracy, changes always take place. But institution must remain, and they must continue to, uphold the highest traditions of our democracy. Therefore, I think it enjoins upon all of us, particularly all the members, whether they are belonging to ruling party or opposition party, to uphold these values, because there is a lot more can be achieved if we are willing to listen to one another and put forth our points of view. They may be acceptable, they may not be acceptable. At least there should be a continuous dialogue and discussion.
Okay. Mr. Ketkar, taking the discussion forward, another takeaway from the Vice President's message to the members, apart from frequent disruptions, apart from improving the image of the legislatures, one thing that he pointed out, and in fact due importance that he's been according, is to the standing committees of Parliament, the department-related standing committees. Do you think this is one practice that should be adopted by states as well, wherein the legislators feel more responsible, more accountable, more involved towards policy making?
Definitely. Before coming to the standing committee's issue, Tina, I want to point out one more aspect. Earlier there was some institutionalization about the democratic culture within political parties. Now, barring BJP and to some extent communist parties, this culture is, completely, ignored. And because of the dynastic and one leader parties mostly having regional aspirations, this internal democracy, and when you don't have mechanism of internal democracy, naturally it will have impact on our larger democratic processes also. I think this is one of the factors that is contributing to this, different kinds of disruptions. But when you are talking about the various committees and, especially the role of standing committees, see, this one parliamentary mechanism that has a very critical role in any democracy, because there are many issues and many dimensions of a legislation which you cannot discuss and debate in the parliament. So this is a smaller group. This is an all-party group. You can have, discussion. You can call upon various members from, among the stakeholders, and get, various inputs also while deliberating this at the standing committee level. So you have multiple options open before tabling the bill on the floor of the House. So this committee culture, and what has started happening as it was a very hot discussion when Mr. Rahul Gandhi raised this issue of attempts of incursion from Chinese side in Ladakh, and when some certain people pointed out that out of so many meetings of the Standing Committee on Defense, of which he himself is a member, these many meetings he didn't attend. That clearly shows that, if you don't have sincerity, because these committees, they also have a, stipulated time period to complete their work. And as Mr. Iyer rightly pointed out, this is a very precious time if we are planning to go with certain legislative agenda. Members not being serious about the, about their role as, not just as member of parliament, but being member of parliament, they are part of certain committees, because those are who actually decide the policy mechanisms and the legislative, agenda for the coming sessions. If the members and respective to their political parties are not particular about this, then they are actually not performing their role in the parliamentary system. Because this is, if this debate and discussion in the parliament is heart and soul, then these are the veins. These committees actually supply blood to this heart and soul process of the entire parliamentary mechanism.
Definitely. And members have to realize that, their job doesn't end only when they have been elected after months of campaigning by the people. Their real job starts when they enter parliament, and they have to be accountable to people. They have to raise issues concerning the representatives who they are standing for in the highest institution, which is the parliament. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of Discussion today, sharing your perspective on the subject and beautifully putting forth your views on the various messages delivered by the Vice President to the newly elected members. Pleasure having you on the show, sirs. So with that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of Discussion today. You can also watch our program on YouTube and send us your feedback and suggestions as well. Thank you very much for your time.